Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Astronomy Live. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the great eclipse coming August 21st in just a little under 2 weeks. So there have been a number of videos on YouTube, eclipse, and I'm not going to try to cover every aspect of it. Obviously, it's going to be a great event, a major event here across the United States, where totality will cut from the west coast through to the east coast. What I really want to talk about tonight, and what we're are discussing why the eclipse appears to move from the west coast to the east coast. This seems to be surprising to many people. YouTube, and a number of videos have claimed that this is proof that something's not right. Maybe the Earth's flat and it's not really uh, astronomers say it is, or maybe it's not really the moon covering up the sun. Any number of excuses have been offered as to what's really going on here, that it can't be the moon covering up, but that's really what it is, and we're going to talk about it tonight. So I want this to be sort of an interactive hangout as much as possible. I want people to ask questions, close eye on the chat, and feel free to ask questions or even, try to basically debate. If you think I'm wrong about something, let's have a debate about it and discuss it in a civil sort of way. So I want to have questions and field as many questions as I can. If you have any general questions about the eclipse, that's great too. A little bit later, we're going to get into what you can do to safely view and what not to do when trying to view the eclipse, because it's very important to be safe here. You don't want to blind yourself, and if you do things the wrong way, in ways that you might not expect, you might think that what you're doing is safe, and after you've done it, you may not notice anything right away, but the thing about it is that you can damage your vision without feeling like you're damaging your vision, and that can lead to lifelong consequences, and we definitely don't want that. Some discussion about what you can do to be safe and safely view the eclipse. John Smith says my audio is cutting out here. Um, hmm, don't know why that is. Let me try a different. Well, actually, I don't have a different microphone right now. Let me see here. Let me see if I can listen in myself. Can anyone confirm that? Is my audio working? See anything? You should be able to see a map of the totality right now. Okay, Elvis, I think, can see things. Let me check here, see how the audio is coming in. So stand by 1 second. Let me see if I can catch my own audio and see how it sounds. Yeah, I played back a little bit of audio, and I noticed it was cutting out a bit. Yeah, sorry, I turned off my mic for a second so I could listen to the audio of my own. I'm not sure what's going on with the stream. I've got really good signal strength on what should be really good internet, so if it's having trouble, I'm going to blame it because I'm on pretty strong Wi-Fi here, and it should be coming in clear. So we'll just press forward and see how things go. Hopefully, we don't have too many issues here with the audio, but if you do hear issues, please let me know in the chat, and I'll see what I can do. But I can actually do here. So it's still cutting out. Well, that's not good. Let me see if I can try to adjust the bandwidth and redo that. Okay. I just cycled the bandwidth for the upload. Yeah, okay. So I guess we'll just keep going here. This is NASA's map showing the path of totality. And you can see some information here about where the greatest duration will occur, all of that. You can also find a variety of other maps. Some are quite nice, interactive maps. This is on Xavier's site, and if you click along the map, you can find out for any given location what eclipse will occur each phase of the eclipse. Do note that if you want to see the totality, if you want to see the sun totally eclipsed, you have to be within this core path of totality. And depending on how close you get to the center of that path, that will determine how much totality you get. So if you the path, you're going to get about 2.5 minutes almost anywhere in the United States. And so you can see here the start of total at 17:30:44. The end of total eclipse is a little over 2 minutes, about 2.25 minutes later. There at 3. So this is a nice way to get some information about how long the eclipse is going to last. But noticing is that the eclipse totality starts here on the west coast and ends on the east coast. This is surprising to some people because you would think that, well, the moon seems to rise in the east and set in the west, and the Earth's rotation obviously is the moon able to orbit the Earth from west to east. So why is the eclipse path moving from west to east instead of east to west? So the reason for this is because, in simple terms, the moon's orbital velocity is greater than the Earth's. So let's come into Celestia here and take a quick look. So this is a view from August 21st. And you can see here in the Pacific, this dark spot here, this is Celestia rendering the position of the moon's shadow on the Earth during the eclipse. And I'm going to zoom it out here so you can see the moon in its orbit. Let's get in a little closer to the moon. There we go. If you speed the simulation up, you'll be able to see the moon moving in its orbit, and it's. But we'll take another look here in a second. But you can actually see the moon's shadow moving across the surface of the Earth. It hasn't moved very much in its orbit from the time the eclipse starts to the time the eclipse ends. It takes basically a month for the moon to go to Earth once. But it doesn't take that long for the moon's shadow to move across the surface of the Earth. That's why the path of totality seems to move from. Let's see here. Hopefully this is showing my spreadsheet. It seems like it is. That's not good. Okay, well, we'll have to do full screen then. Okay, now it should work. Yeah, all right. So a few years ago, I developed a spreadsheet for calculating the position of the moon from on Earth. You simply put in the date and time and your location on Earth, and it tells you what the moon's coordinates are, both and precessed to J2000. Gives you the altitude and azimuth of the moon, the lunar phase, and the apparent orientation of the horizon. And then a little while later, I expanded the spreadsheet to include calculations for the sun as well. And the equation back to Simon Newcomb in the 19th century. And so these equations predate the existence of NASA. For the moon, I used that were published by, I believe, French mathematicians and astronomers. Actually, and it's actually was published decades ago. So, again, these are not new equations by any stretch of the imagination, but they are NASA. In fact, as I said, the calculations for the sun predate the existence of NASA. So there's really no room here for conspiracy. Publish this in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. So you can come in and see it for yourself. And I'm going to make this spreadsheet available as a link in the video description. You can inspect these calculations. And, if I'm fudging it somehow, by all means, show me how I'm fudging it. But one more time, to allow it to calculate the circumstances of the eclipse. And so an approximate figure for the size of the moon's umbral shadow at the distance that Earth is from the moon. And so for this, it used center to center distance of the moon's center point to the Earth's center point to calculate approximately how large the moon's shadow is in kilometers. It also calculates the size of Earth's umbral shadow at the distance of the moon, conversely, because some people are seemingly surprised by this, but yeah, the small at the distance of the Earth. If you think about it, if you think about the moon's apparent angular size, it's just as large in the sky as the sun is. So if you're moon than the Earth is, then the moon is going to take up less of the sky than the sun, and the moon will never be able to completely cover the sun. That means shadow at that distance. So Earth is just at the right distance from the moon for this to happen. Earth is about 400 times than it is to the sun, and the moon is about 400 times smaller than the sun. And so because those circumstances line up, you're able to get these total that are just large enough to completely cover the sun. Also, the spreadsheet will calculate the approximate coordinates of the umbral shadow. These are fairly approximate calculations here because for this I'm assuming that Earth is a perfect sphere, which isn't quite true. These to try to get within the path of totality. If you really want to know if you're in the path of totality or not, you should use the tools that are out there. All the tools that are up here in the spreadsheet will give you better information. If you put in your location, your expected observing location here in longitude and latitude, the assumption is not made that Earth is spherical. It actually does take into account Earth's oblate shape when telling you what the angular separation of the moon and sun are, eclipse is total or not. And so at this location, at about 1743 Universal Time, and this is basically near Casper, Wyoming, and you can see here that the eclipse is complete. It's completely covering up the sun, and that's great. So that gives you that information. Now, at the same time, you'll notice that the shadow point here is a little bit different than the observer center point, and that's because of some of the assumptions that were being made here to calculate these coordinates. But it's good enough for what this shows. If we go back here and say start at 1700 Universal Time, okay, here are the longitude and latitude of this umbral shadow of the moon projected out onto the Earth. And it calculates this by first calculating where the shadow is being projected out into space in terms of right. Then it figures out where the Earth is roughly relative to the moon. Where's the Earth if you were at the center point of the moon looking towards the Earth? What are in right ascension and declination? Then it looks at the difference between that. It takes into account the angular size of the angular diameter, so the angular size of the Earth, the moon, again, assuming the Earth were spherical. And it takes all this information and calculates up the center point of the Earth's surface. And so what we can see here is as we move time forward, that shadow further east. At the same time, and this is kind of interesting, the moon's longitude and latitude at 1700, 1800, 1900. It's going further and further west. In this case, the longitude such that negative is west longitude. And you can see the moon is falling further and further back west due to Earth's rotation. Because the moon's velocity is higher, the moon's orbital velocity is higher than the rotational velocity of Earth, the from west to east. So if we come back in here to celestia, let's go back to August 21st. And we slow it down here a little bit. We can see that shadow moving from across the US. So yeah, that is what we expect for this eclipse. And you don't have to take NASA's word for it. You don't even have to take my word for it. But I am giving you guys these calculations so you can see it for yourself and see that tools like this one are the eclipse is expected to move from west to east. So just some figures here for you. Actually, let me see if I can get Google Earth here to work in a second, but just some figures here for you. The moon's average orbital velocity is about 3,600 an hour. The Earth's rotational velocity is only about 1,675 kilometers an hour. So that's about a 2,000 kilometer an hour difference on average. Because of that, that is why you see the shadow moving like that faster than the rotation of Earth, although the moon only travels a small portion of its orbit. So, in terms of the moon's position, if you projected a straight line from the center point of the moon to the surface of the Earth, that point would move west due to the rotation of the Earth. But there's other things going on too, like foreshortening. So let me see if I can get Earth to display properly here. Let's see. Not really, not all that great. The resolution is quite terrible. Force Google Earth into a higher resolution mode, but we'll just do a full screen share to do it like this. So there we go. So this is coordinates that were being put out by the spreadsheet and plotting them onto Google Earth. 1700, 1730, 1800, 1830, 1900 increments. And drawing a line between those points, you can see that the path predicted by my spreadsheet generally matches the path that you'll see on other websites. And that, again, it moves west to east. The other interesting thing to notice here is that the distance between, say, the point 1730 are longer than points later in the eclipse. In other words, the shadow is over the surface of the Earth at these points than later at these points. Now, why is that? Well, let's come back in here to celestial. Again, what's happening here is that the shadow is traveling over a heavily portion of the Earth at the start of the eclipse. And so because of that, you have between points equally spaced in time when it's first coming over the limb of the Earth than when it's over the middle of the Earth. So that's why the ground velocity, if you will, of the shadow is not constant. You also have to consider of the Earth that it's passing over matters as well. If it were passing over the equator, then the Earth's full rotational velocity has to be factored into account here. As that latitude increases, the ground velocity, if you will, or the rotational velocity of that spot on the ground is not as great. Things have to be taken into account, and they basically are being taken into account by my spreadsheet. Again, there are some approximations made for the shape of the Earth, but it will give you roughly approximate coordinates, enough that you can plot that out on a tool like Google Earth and see it for yourself. All right, so I do want to cover some safety tips here, but before we go to that, I just want to see what questions you guys and see if I can address any questions you guys might have about the eclipse or about why it looks the way it does. Let's see. Okay, so Requiem says or asks if I saw Anthony Riley's bet. I guess he did a video, a bet against Sly that he bets he will not see a partial eclipse at his location looked at the circumstances for England specifically. I mean, I think we could do that right here. But let's say, and so you have the eclipse still occurring at sunset, but it is, of course, a partial eclipse. But yeah, they should get a partial eclipse up there. Where you are in England, it could be somewhat tricky to see if the weather's not good. So maybe he's right, but if he's right, it's probably because of the weather. Yeah, that's interesting. No, I hadn't seen that. I'm not super familiar with Anthony Riley, although I've heard the name quite a bit. To be honest, I don't normally. Earth subject's kind of boring to me, if I'm perfectly blunt. But yeah, it's way I'm addressing it not only because there's a ton of flat Earth videos talking about, but other people as well. I mean, it's just generally confusing to a lot of people whether they're flat or because intuitively you might think that it should move from east to west because that's the direction that the sun and moon appear to rise and set, but that's not really the case. So Elvis asked if I could choose anywhere in the U.S. to watch the eclipse, where and why would I choose to be? That's a great question. For the area where totality will be the greatest. But I think the smarter move is to pick the location where you're most likely to have good. There's bad. It doesn't matter how much totality you're getting. If you can't see it, then you drove out there or flew out there for almost no reason at all. So further into the west of the United States, just statistically speaking. And statistically speaking, apparently, from what I've been told, Eastern is supposed to be the place where they're going to have the best chance for clear weather. Eastern Oregon, of course, not Western Oregon, where people typically think of Oregon as rainy and cloudy. But east of the mountains, you get a better weather pattern. And so booking locations in Eastern Oregon, it's actually very hard to try to find a space over there now at this point to watch the eclipse. The other danger to get to a spot to watch the eclipse is that you could very easily find yourself stuck in a traffic jam trying to get to the path of totality if you're driving on the day. So you want to give yourself plenty of time to get in position because the sad fact of the matter that there are going to be people stuck on the interstate, into the path of totality, and they just don't end up making it. If you're just outside the path of totality, you're not going to really see the full eclipse. If you're right at the edge, you might see Baily's beads where the sun is peeking through valleys on the moon and just barely shining through into the path of totality. So you get at least some time where the sun is totally eclipsed and you can see the beautiful faint corona, which is the outer atmosphere of the stretching out into the sky. And another interesting and fun project that you can take part of is called the Eclipse Mega Movie Project. Get as many photos of the eclipse as they can from all across the country, from the west coast to the east coast. And they want those photos to be very careful and tagged for time so that you know exactly when the photo was taken and where the photo was taken, because they're going to put them into a matrix by time and location to create a movie of how the sun's corona changed over the course of the eclipse. Time for the shadow of the moon to go from the west coast to the east coast from about 1717 universal time, to was it 1847? So about an hour and a half to go from one coast of the United States to the other, and so that's to show some degree of change. So any photos they can get, they're eager to get, as long as they can get accurate information about when and where the photo was taken. I'm not able to make it to Oregon, but I am going to head out west to get my best possible chance for clear weather. So hopefully my site does end up having clear weather and I'm able to see and photograph the eclipse and bring that back to you guys. I will not be able to live webcast during the eclipse. I don't intend having a good cell phone connection to provide internet for that. And even if I do have a cell phone connection, from my experience at launches, I know how a large crowd of people who are desperately trying to look up things online and surf on their phones around the time of a launch or whatever, people are streaming the cell phone networks get jammed up and you just can't get any data through. So I'm not anticipating live streaming the eclipse, unfortunately, but I will be photos and video with my telescope and with a wide field camera as well that I'll bring back and upload afterwards. Let's see. Apparently the audio is still cutting out and I don't know why. That's really unfortunate. I'm not happy about that, and I'm not sure why. So, any other questions? I'm not sure how you pronounce this name, but Selamon says, assumption seems legit. Well, I wouldn't exactly call it assumption-based science. It's math-based science for sure. And hey, the math is going to be first. It for the questions. So let's go ahead and delve into safety here for a bit. Salesman says, good luck with your snarky mocking. You will be humbled or silenced. Either way, your faith is in men. That's where you lost. So, and it's not a matter of faith. It's just a matter of facts and hard calculation and empirical data. Well, you know, I'm pretty confident my calculations will be proven right. Math is a description of reality, language of science. And so we can use math to describe reality, and that's what I'm doing with a spreadsheet. So feel free to show where it's wrong and feel free to show how it, but I think you're going to find that it matches up pretty darn good. So let's go into a little bit of safety here. Let's see, I'm still streaming properly. Yep, looks like you can see the website I'm showing here. I highly recommend safe. So the keyword there is safe. I would not recommend off-brand glasses. I would go to one of the major, well-known of safe solar filters, a company like Lunt or Daystar or Thousand Oaks Optical, or even Celestron, some big name company that you know and recognize as a high quality maker of filters, especially solar filters. And Lunt is one of those companies. You can get their glasses from Amazon, but unfortunately, a lot of these companies, they're out of stock until very close. So you're going to want to order sooner rather than later to have any chance of getting equipment at this point. And unfortunately, there's a lot of price on too. I just ordered some Thousand Oaks solar film to make my own solar filters a couple weeks ago, and at the time for a couple sheets of 4-inch by 4-inch material. Those that same product right now is skyrocketing 4 times last I checked. So the sooner you get it, the better. But I would recommend safe sun viewing glasses like this. Again, get it from a major supplier, get it from somebody you trust. You can also save your money and do it completely free with just a cardboard box by the actor, but it's important that you do this properly and safely here. So the way you make a pinhole projector is literally you take a pin, hole, say in a box, a piece of cardboard, and you project an image of the sun onto a screen on the opposite side. Now, in this example, stick your head into the box, and this helps you block out stray light. But you have to be careful, first of all, not to block the projection, and also you have to the wrong way. You do not want to look out the pinhole. If you just looked at this figure and you didn't look too closely into it, you might think that you're supposed to look out safe. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to face your head towards the screen to see the projected image of the sun. The interesting thing about this eclipse is that of natural pinhole projectors all around you. If you have any trees, anything that the sunlight is passing through gaps, you're going to see project all over the ground as the sun approaches totality. And so that'll be interesting to see, even if you're not deliberately making a pin bar, just make sure you're using it properly. You can also project from refracting telescopes, but again, you want to be careful about that, because if somebody accidentally looks into that beam, they're going to be blinded. And the scary thing about it is, let's say you did something unsafe, you looked at using optics that weren't really proper, weren't really safe. You may not notice the damage right away. You may not feel your eye, but what will happen is it can actually take a delayed period of time before the cells in your eyes and your retina, and you lose that vision. And so you may feel fine. You think you did everything safely. You go to bed that night. You wake up the next morning, and you look in the mirror and you can't see your face. Your face looks blank and featureless because cells in the center of your retina where you burn them, but your brain is filling in with whatever information it's still getting from other surrounding cells. And so you lose the ability to see regions of your retina wherever you burned it, but it won't necessarily show up in your vision as a black spot. It's just a lack of information, and your best it can. And so it's kind of scary and unfortunate, but if you do damage your vision, you may not even notice it right away. So just because it doesn't feel doing damage, you have to be sure that what you're doing is safe, and you have to be very careful about that. So one thing I do recommend are safe solar built-in, like the Coronado PST. This is the telescope I'm going to be using to view the partial phases of the eclipse, and you can see the sun in hydrogen alpha, you can see prominences, you can see filaments, solar flares, all of that great stuff with this telescope. Great thing about it is because the solar filter is built in, you're pretty much guaranteed to be safe there unless you've done something to damage that filter. You do want to take good you can't accidentally, forget to screw on the filter. It's built in. That's all this telescope does, is solar observing. However, you want to take the filter off, or in this case, you want to look up from the solar telescope, take off the sun viewing glasses, and view totality without any filter. Totality will be safe to view, but only in that 2-minute period where the sun is totally eclipsed can you safely look at the sun. That is the time where you can look at it and see the beautiful corona and all of that. But as soon as totality ends, you want to go right back to using your safely filtered solar telescopes, filters, and all the rest. So I think that covers pretty much everything I wanted to cover. Do we have any more questions here? Doesn't look like we have. Doesn't look like we have too many. But yeah, sounds good. So safe and fun total solar eclipse. If you can, try to get to totality. But even if you can't, put on some safe solar in its partial phases, because it'll still be a great event to take part of. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. I don't want the webcast to go too long. But if you guys have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And again, I will link to my spreadsheet in the video description. Thanks for watching. Clear skies, folks.